Hello, viewers, or shall I say Dreamfasters. I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache, and welcome, my Dreamfasters, to TV Treasures. In 2019, I did a 20th century review of the Dark Crystal. And since then, well, for that review, I mostly did the review of this movie right here as part of to capitalize on the Netflix series Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. And now I'm going to review it. But I know what you probably have on your mind. Now, I know what most of you are thinking, but didn't you already review this show back when it came out in 2019? Yeah, but that was basically me, yours truly, rambling in front of a camera for about 14 minutes. And now that I have started TV Treasures, I shall now give the series a proper review, screenshots and all. So let's dream fast, my viewers, and review this series, shall we? Another world, another time, in the age of innocence. The Skeksis ruled Thra, that is, until they drained the Gelfling of its very essence and created the Darkening. Now it is up to 3 Gelflings from 7 clans. Brave Rian from Stone in the Wood, the clever Brea from the Vapra clan, and the gentle Deet from the Groton clan. Together they must bring the 7 clans together to bring about the Age of Resistance. Okay, I am not using that voice throughout the entirety of this review. Otherwise, my throat will be drained of essence. But what did I think of this series? Well, I think that this Emmy Award-winning series, directed by Louis Leterrier, called Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, is a beautiful show, a work of art, if you will. And I think it was the best thing to come out of 2019. So, let's talk a little bit about it. First, let's talk about the creatures and the production design, the puppets, and the lore of this series. You got all kinds of creatures in Thra. You get some new ones, but you also get some old ones from the movie, like the Landstriders. As far as the new ones are concerned, you get these spider-like creatures called the Aratham, who combine with the scientists' assistants make the Gartham. And the way the Aratham talk are a nice little homage to the way the Helping Hands talked in Labyrinth. Then you have these flying manta rays called the Crystal Skimmers, as well as a rock creature literally called Lore, who is Brea's protector. Working on the creature and costume design is Brian Froud, who worked on both Labyrinth and the original Dark Crystal, as well as his son, Toby Froud, who is the baby in Labyrinth. The production design of this show is fantastic. I could literally get lost looking at some of these backgrounds. What's also amazing is the puppetry, which everyone put their heart and soul into. The puppetry is so good that you don't even notice that these characters are puppets. You just see the characters. Everything in the show was handcrafted. Well, pretty much everything. Yeah, it's time to talk about the Landstrider in the room. Yeah, this show used some green screen, but I think they integrated really good. And I feel like they've definitely improved since their fiery days. Outside of the green screen, this show also uses CGI. But the CGI blends so well with the practical effects, I can't tell what is supposed to be CGI and what is supposed to be practical. Now let's talk about the world building of this show. The world building in this show is so big and so deep, I could write a book on the subject. To how there's 7 clans, and I want to know more about these clans and how they work and how they function. Especially the Deucin clan, who are probably the most interesting looking ones of them all. Another thing I should mention is that there is a lot of gross out in this show. And not only that, there is a lot of nightmare fuel. I dare say it's even darker than the movie. We get bloodshed in this show. This is a show that really earns its PG rating because you need parental guidance suggested in order to watch it. And now that I've talked all about that, let us look at the long road to how we got to this series. Shall we? Originally, there was supposed to be a sequel to The Dark Crystal called The Power of the Dark Crystal, which was in development hell for years before it got abandoned. The Power of the Dark Crystal would become a 12-issue comic book series. Sometime later, someone pitched the idea for a prequel to The Dark Crystal in the vein of an animated show, and where everything would be animated, including the Gelflings, and the only puppet characters would be the Skeksis. But Netflix, and of course the Jim Henson Company, decided to go with full-on puppets and animatronics, and spent 2 years working on the show that we know today. Now let us talk about the characters. Now there are so many characters. Just like the Howdy Doody review, it would take me forever to get through every single one of them. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about both the cast and the characters. The cast mostly being the people who either puppeteered them, if I feel like I have anything to say about the puppeteers, but mostly the voice cast. And I will be talking about the characters at the same time as I do with my 20th century reviews. And I'll be splitting both the main characters, mostly the main characters, supporting characters. I'll be including both of them at once. And I'll be splitting the good guys and the bad guys. So, let's start with the good guys, shall we? First, let's talk about Olgra, or as the show calls her, Mother Olgra. Mother Olga feels like she's let everyone down. She tries to make things right from coming back from her cosmic voyage. But boy, could that have not have been farther away from the truth. She tries to reconnect with her friends like the Archer and tries to set things right. She tries to undo her wrongs. She knows that if she fails, all is lost. And it's a really heavy burden on her. She's voiced by Donna Kimball, who is also the voice of Moki in Back to the Rock, Fraggle Rock. And I gotta say, Donna Kimball does do a pretty spot-on impression of Billy Widall's Olga from the original movie. Then there's Rian, who out of all the characters in the show has the most growth. And he's also been through the most suffering. He's lost the love of his life, and everyone thinks he's a killer. And when I mean everyone, I mean legit mean everyone. His own family and friends thinks he's a killer, and everyone in Thra thinks he's a killer. He sacrifices a lot to keep the balance, but in the end, he ends up becoming the key to keep the resistance in check. He's voiced by Terry Egerton, who was also in both Rocket Man and the Sing movies. Then there's Brea, who is a princess and loves to read books. She has a thirst for knowledge, but for the most part, she has a thirst for truth and will do anything to reveal the truth. She's become quite a beloved character in the series, and she's voiced by Anya Taylor-Joy, who's been making quite the name for herself in Hollywood with such films as Emma 2020, Last Night in Soho, and The Queen's Gambit, and is also said to appear as Princess Peach in the Illumination Mario Brothers movie. And speaking of beloved characters, let's talk about the fan favorite, Deet. And just like Kira in the original movie, she has quite the way with animals. And she never met anyone she could not call a friend. She's kind, she's gentle, she's loving, and she's quite caring. And it's quite easy to see why everyone's crazy about her and why she's become a fan favorite of the series. The best scene in the whole series, at least to my opinion, is the scene in where she's talking with Brea about the people they love and the people they lost. It's a really heartfelt scene. And she's voiced by Game of Thrones alumni Natalie Emmanuel. Another character who's become a fan favorite is Hub, a podling who wants to be a paladin and who thinks his spoon is a sword. He is a character you just want to put in your pocket and never let him go. He is so freaking cute. Every time he's on screen, he either steals the show with his cuteness or with his comedy. And speaking of funny characters, let's talk about Maldra Argot. She goes from being wise, giving wisdom, to just acting like a freaking Muppet. If Yoda had a sister, it would definitely be her. Now it's time to talk about my favorite character, the Heretic, aka the good Skeksis. He is very funny. Every time he gets ticked off at the Wanderer just for being too slow. No, seriously, he's as slow as a sloth. It has me healed over laughing. He is so funny. Many of the lines he says in the show would end up becoming running gags on 20th Century Reviews.
So slow! That doesn't even make sense! Could you be any slower? Don't answer that!
Heretic is voiced by comedian himself, Andy Samberg, who has also been in Hotel Transylvania, as well as Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs, and most recently, Chippendales Rescue Rangers. Now, let us talk about the baddies, particularly the Skeksis. Shall we? First up, there's Celadon, who wants to be Almadra so damn much that it's a weight on her shoulders. And when she does become Almadra, she doesn't earn it and becomes a control freak. And now let's talk about my favorite character from the movie, the Chamberlain. And he is vicious. And he's a master power-hungry manipulator. He's so vicious that he's comical. He also has some of the best dialogue in the show. He's voiced by Simon Pegg, who was also in Shaun of the Dead, as well as Hot Fuzz. And now it's time to talk about the scientist, who's a character you can't help but love to hate. But at the same time, you can't help but feel sorry for him. I mean, he's the smartest out of all the Skeksis. He does all the work and gets none of the credit. I mean, he gets abused like there ain't no tomorrow. But the reason you hate this guy is not only the fact that he drains gelflings of their essence, but he also laughs in glee when he sees them being drained. And not only that, there's a scene in where he beats the crap out of his assistant. And not only beats the crap out of him, he beats him to a bloody pulp. But at the same time, you can't help but feel sorry for him because of all the abuse he gets. And he's voiced by Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill. Okay, something I failed to mention in my review for Rhapsody Street Kids Believe in Santa is the fact that Mark Hamill voiced the Joker in Batman the Animated Series.
Now look, my rude friend. We can't have people cursing at each other on the freeway. It's simply not polite.
And then you have the Collector, who, if you want a perfect visual example of the gross out of this show, he's pretty much a walking example. He has so much snot coming out of his nose. I've never seen so much come out of one creature. He's voiced by Awkwafina, who is also in Crazy Rich Asians, as well as Raya and the Last Dragon. Next up is the Hunter, and damn is he terrifying. As terrifying as a puppet could be. He's also a cold-blooded stone-hearted killer. He's like a wild animal hunting for his prey. He looks like a demon, straight from the pits of hell. He's puppeteered by Kevin Clash, who was also the puppeteer of Elmo on Sesame Street. And the Hunter is his most badass character since Splinter in the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. And it turns out Kevin Clash actually has a history with the Dark Crystal, as he was originally going to puppeteer the original movie, but turned it down because he was too busy with Captain Kangaroo and Space Coaster. But he would end up puppeteering Labyrinth, where he puppeteered one of the Fireys. Recognize this scene? So it's almost like him puppeteering in this series is a second chance for him. Next up is the Scroll Keeper, who's probably the most sophisticated out of all the Skeksis. He has a very elegant way, to put it lightly. He too has a few good laughs in the show. He strikes a connection with the character Brea in The Coach, but then later when Brea finds out what monsters the Skeksis are, it's a huge punch to the gut. And last but not least, we have the Emperor, the big baddie, the big boss of the series. He's the one who's constantly pulling the strings. He really wants to stay in control and in power of Thra. He's voiced by Jason Isaacs, who was also Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter movies, as well as playing Captain Hook in the 2003 Peter Pan. So he has quite the handle in playing villains. Okay. And now it's time to talk about the Ornamentalist. And oh boy, is she annoying. The only positive I could give to her is that she has good costume design, but that doesn't make her any less annoying. Her voice is so annoying. Seriously, if you think Jar Jar Binks' voice is annoying, get an earful of this.
The Emperor won't like that.
I've talked about most of the positives of this show. Do I have any particular negatives? Well, there is probably one. The problem I have with the show is that it got canceled. Nobody really knows what reason or why it was canceled, but there was some theories going around, but nothing concrete. Some say it's because of COVID. Others say it's because Netflix was trying to make room for the abomination that was Cuties. And hardcore Dark Crystal fan Danny Gallows of the YouTube channel Dream Fast with Me has theorized that the show was marketed to the wrong crowd. Instead of being marketed to people who love something like Game of Thrones, it was marketed to people who love Stranger Things and Cobra Kai. But for some reason, the show was canceled. Fans of the show have been petitioning for a second season, including yours truly. If you want to sign my petition, all you gotta do is go to change.org and sign my petition. But for whatever future holds for Rianne, Brea, and Deet, we will just have to wait and see. Well, that was the end of my TV Treasures review of Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Well, so long.